Greetings once again to this latest report on the ongoing saga of unravelment that is the demise of the euro currency. I would like to share with you my observations as this flawed crock continues on its trajectory towards its inevitable, costly and ugly end. I have to say that nothing I have seen since my last bulletin has modified my faith in this outcome in the least. In truth, the euro has already failed. The project is already dead in the water. It's simply that its woolly-minded proponents cannot bring themselves to admit it. This was supposed to be the major step in the harmonising of European standards and promised so much. Well, actually, it didn't itself, but its proponents certainly did. They assured us a single currency would bring jobs, growth and prosperity to this continent. That's what they told us, at any rate, our wonderful politicians. But unfortunately, just as politicians always do, they lied to us. The whole thing has turned into a complete disaster. Weekly, we see pictures of Greece in flames. There seem to be solid national strikes in the country virtually every month, which make it even more impossible for Greece to dig itself out of its debt mountain. The country's leaders are holding another emergency meeting today to discuss what further cost savings can be made and which national assets to sell off to mitigate the immense burden the country is under. Incidentally, I noted with a wry smile that the powers that be have stopped talking about a default in the case of countries like Greece and Portugal and Ireland. They've been thinking up nicer, less alarming sounding words to describe the dire situation facing these countries. I've heard the terms soft restructuring and reprofiling of the debt being used instead. Trying to keep this disastrous currency union together will require a damn sight more effort than just flicking through a thesaurus for cuddly euphemisms. And as if to prove the point, ratings agency Fitch is having none of this nonsense and has said soft restructuring is de facto default, and they then went on to knock another 3 notches off of Greece's already appalling credit rating. 2-year Greek paper now yields over 26%, more than many of us pay on our personal credit cards, and at a totally unprecedented level for a sovereign Western nation. Asset sales are now underway in Greece, but to raise any meaningful cash, enough to dig them out of the red that is, would require them to sell off some of their many islands. A desperate measure indeed, but this is the price of Euro membership for a country that was never fit for it in the first place. As a side note, Fitch also changed fellow pig country member Italy's outlook from neutral to negative. It's all coming to pieces, guys. In regards to Spain, I've been keeping records of bond yields for this Eurozone member for several weeks now, along with a handful of other peripheral countries. Spanish bonds have been noteworthy for their volatility of late, but there was a more positive mood, or should I say more decisive move, to the upside in yields over the last week. I was at something of a loss to account for this phenomenon until I saw the reports at the weekend, as you probably have too, of the scenes in Madrid. The city centre now bears a striking similarity to that of Cairo a few months ago. And it's not just Madrid. There were other camps forming in Spain's other cities, and even sympathy demonstrations called in support of Spain's young people as far away as Berlin in Germany. It looks rather as if the so-called Arab Spring has crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and established a foothold in southern Europe. Only time can tell if this movement will spread yet further, but with a generation of young people, not only in Spain, facing the prospect of no jobs, no pensions, no homes, no future and no money, it would be foolish to suppose otherwise. The grand schemers like Helmut Kohl, the German Chancellor of the 1990s, who airily dismissed such possibilities by suggesting the device of transfer payments between rich and poor countries, simply didn't get it. These young people do not want a life of welfare dependency. They don't want to, as increasing numbers of them are, sit around by the side of the road smoking drugs to kill the days away. They want what any normal young person wants: a home, a family, a meaningful job or career that pays a living wage, and a pension at the end of it for when they're too old to work anymore. Who can blame them? These are normal aspirations, but aspirations which our European governments have shown no ability nor interest in satisfying. As regards to Ireland, which is pretty much as big an economic basket case as Greece, The comments of one well-respected economist writing in the Irish Times online caught my eye a few days ago. I cannot now find the reference. A search might reveal it for anyone seeking the entire article, but there was just one aspect to it that I found very illuminating. The writer called attention to the futility of continuing to lend more and more money to Ireland. There was no way, he said, that the country could ever afford to pay it all back, and the fact was that they'd never be able to pay it back was a rather obvious fact that must have occurred to others and not just to him alone. So he pondered on this futility, determined to get to the bottom of it, convinced that there had to be some valid reasoning behind it. He refused to accept the IMF and the ECB were bankrolling his country out of sheer good-natured stupidity. After a great deal of pondering on the matter, he came up with a credible solution. The IMF and ECB are, he believes, pumping funds into Ireland in order to buy time to enable private investors, read big banks, to liquidate their positions in the country and get the hell out of it before it collapses. He thinks of these loans now not as loans, but rather as gifts that never need to be returned. He is delighted that he is no longer horrified by the prospect of his country having to face the burden of paying this money back. He knows now it will never happen. He knows the bulk of the debt will simply have to be written off. That pleases him immensely. Unfortunately for the rest of us, however, that money has been creamed off us in taxes and outright contributions to the IMF. It's yet another example of the socialisation of private losses. The middle classes of the US, the UK, Canada, Germany and France will pay for this most likely in cuts to essential services. It's rather strange because I don't remember there being any International Socialist Party candidates at recent elections in any of these countries. Nevertheless, that seems to be the way the world is being run nowadays. I believe it was Lenin who said that democracy was essential for communism to succeed. I guess he was right.